Big news. First, we announced that the Sultan of Brunei has had a turnaround. He has reversed and changed course and will not enforce the execution of LGBT people in Brunei. The worldwide pressure of people like Elton John apparently have had effect. Calls for boycotts apparently can be successful. What do you think about the Sultan of Brunei's announcement this week?
Our actions always speak louder than our words, and the more we continue to put action behind our protests, that's the best way to create change.
But that might not be what happened here. The Sultan specifically went on record to say that this is not because there have been protests to my communities and to my hotels around the world. He said, oh, let me clarify what I said before. This is what it was. Is that true? I don't know. But he's trying to play this as if any protest did not affect his decision, as if this is just coming from him.
He didn't change course. He just took a detour. As far as I'm concerned, this is a win for us. It's a win for the LGBT community, but not really that big of a win because the law is still there. The law is still implemented. All he's saying is that he won't enforce it. That certainly means that he can enforce it at any time.
True.
So they're still under threat. They're still under danger.
Yeah. I think the importance of that observation is the value. Okay. You're going to come in?
Yeah.
Silence now.
No, you could finish your thought.
No, that's fine.
Well, I think it's important to note that the clarification that was made was that basically this moratorium on the death penalty has been in place for decades. The last execution in Brunei was actually in 1957, whereas the last time we executed an innocent person apparently was about 1997. So I'm just saying, they have a lot of other inhumane laws. It certainly is not exactly, a good thing, but we shouldn't necessarily act like we've got the moral compass either. I think the lesson we can take from this is to be willing to fight injustice, whether it's abroad or whether it's in our backyard.
That's an interesting observation. And the point that I was going to make, and really to both, is I think that there's value in what we do. It's happening out. Because being America's most popular live gay talk show, we are here every Wednesday night at 8 o'clock. And the Brunei story has evolved in weeks, and we report on it tonight, and we'll continue to report on it. So to Power's point, if the Sultan begins to enforce in any way, we're going to talk about it here. And the gay community is going to talk about it, and advocates like Elton John are going to raise his voice also. Moving ahead in terms of news, big news this week, we asked the question, Donald Trump, is he actually the biggest loser? It's been reported now that Donald Trump lost more than $1 billion in the last decades in real estate tax filings. And basically, he was elected president as being, a business entrepreneur and perhaps genius in his businesses, and we see that. What do y'all think about the news being reported this week about him losing $1 billion?
Well, I have a question because for everybody on this panel, how many of you own your own business? How many of you are an LLC and file a return? How many of you try to minimize the amount of money you pay state and federal taxes? Okay, so you have something in common with Donald Trump. He just has it on a grander scale than any of us.
You just burned me to my core, sir.
Sorry, sweetie. It's a fact of life. We all have businesses. We all try to make it zero on the bottom line so we pay as little taxes as possible.
He
just happens to have it in a billion times more than us. Every individual
taxpayer in this world, any person who I know who has any sort of intelligence, is going to do their best so that they don't pay as much taxes as, necessarily as required. And
so
that's
why are
because
we want
to,
for doing the same
we want
thing
to
that each
get
of us
the breaks. $1 billion in breaks could feed a nation.
Do you want to use your chip? No, it's the order of magnitude. It works.
Use your chip.
My explanation
All
is
right,
fine.
we're going to move on in terms of news. We want to talk about the breaking news that is happening just today in terms of the escalation of tensions with Iran. Much is going on in the Middle East and the Arabian Gulf. The State Department has called for a mandatory evacuation of all Americans out of Iraq. The justification of the scale down of even the U.S. Embassy in Iraq is such that they are concerned about Iran's influence in the country of Iraq, and they are evacuating only essential personnel staying in Iraq. The Fifth Fleet is being moved into the Gulf of Arabia as we speak, and there is discussion of conflict. And we discussed today how we were going to phrase this, and we're not going to use the ultimate word that is on the horizon, but we'll say conflict of escalation and the escalation of the conflict. We've spent $1 trillion in Iraq to stabilize. Remember, it was going to be our impetus of democracy in the Middle East, and here's where we are today. What do y'all think about our decisions and what's going on in Iran and Iraq?
I think first you have to look at what's taken place, especially over the last 2 weeks, in terms of the number of Saudi Arabia vessels, oil-carrying vessels that were damaged and attacked. Unknown assailants, and the pipelines in Saudi Arabia that carry a large portion of their oil was attacked by drones and destroyed. So the escalation, while we want to talk about the U.S.'s presence, the escalation is by unknown sources, and one would begin to conclude that the sanctions that the United States and the European community have placed on Iran and the increased financial and other sanctions are actually having an impact, so that Iran is trying to act out. I mean, their ultimate goal has been to get rid of Israel and the United States, and by approaching Iraq, they actually get one step closer to the Mediterranean Sea, they get one step closer to Syria and Israel in order to take and control them more than they already do. So, yes, I'm scared. But
the president has suggested that he may commit as many as 120,000 troops to the Middle East. His statement when the New York Times pressed him on that is that was fake news, that they had not announced that. And I understood his statement. It made sense. But he said even if we did that, it would be substantially more than 120,000 troops. Does that worry you in any way in terms of the balance of the instability in the Middle East and our commitment in terms of using...
Listen, U.S. military intervention worries me no matter what, because historically we do not have a good track record for dipping into other countries' affairs and having a good outcome. And then you compound that on top of the fact that Donald Trump is the one in charge of the button. Yeah, no, that scares the shit out of me. Not only because of what, I mean, if a qualified president was doing this, I would be worried. Let alone somebody who thinks that they can navigate policy with tweets.
Okay, I'm going. Chip in, go. Okay. All right, so what concerns me about this is that I have from the beginning thought that Trump was just trying to get us into a big war, a big enough war that he could enact martial law and eventually take power forever. A world war, a war of this magnitude with Iran, with Iraq, over these exact principles, a war that's been fought for so many years on our end, and then also over the Mediterranean, is a great war in terms of getting people to rally behind it and getting change in the way that we don't want to see it. I don't want to be saying, as we joked about you at the beginning of this, all hail King Trump. And I feel like this is the next step to get there. That in doing what we're doing, we are very close to having Trump as our actual dictator, not just the president. And because the election is so close, and because it could be so close as regard to who wins, I think he's going to try to do this. I think he's going to try to remain in power and take absolute power inevitably.
That's myopic in looking at the broad strategy.
Chip,
of
do you need a chip? Are we using a chip on this one?
Where we are on the world stage.
Welcome back,
All
Joe.
right.
That's fine.
So Iran and Iraq is certainly very topical breaking news as we speak.
Thanks so much for watching us. If you like what you saw, please subscribe to our channel and follow us on Facebook.